Thank you everyone for joining this discussion today with regards to the Australian federal election coming up. Voting will start tomorrow, I believe. So we'll start to discuss some of the things. We're going to use this tool called Vote Compass, which has been developed by the ABC, which is Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And it's a great little tool to try and understand how our views as individual public and voters align with the major parties. So at the end of this questionnaire, we'll be given a bit of a report as to where we stand with regards to what parties have already announced about their policies. So the aim today is obviously to look at each of these questions from a humanist perspective and have a rational discussion around what it means to us and what it means to the nation and a broader spectrum as well. So thank you so much for joining today. We've got Auditya Gunti from Perth, Babu Gogineni from Melbourne, and also Sarath Somina from Toronto, and myself, Arjun, from Sydney, to have this rather informal discussion, if you will. So thank you for joining, gentlemen, and let's get started.
So actually, can I ask for the context?
Yep.
What is happening? Who is doing this? Who is created this questionnaire? Coming from India, which is the background for all of us, actually, isn't that quite new? I mean, when have people sat down with a voter and asked them what they want, what they prefer, where they stand? I'm more familiar with a leader going on a horse, let's say, and standing and rallying people around himself or herself, paying those people money for attending the meeting. And after all that, then a few rousing comments, speeches, slogans, and they all go back home. And oftentimes, those who come to the meetings for elections don't turn up on polling day at the booth because voting is not compulsory in India. It's not compulsory in the US. I don't know if it's compulsory in Canada, but in Australia it is. And in Australia, it's a very complicated, complex thing, is it not? In Australia, you have preferences, and you have to say who is your first preference, who is your next preference. And if you forget to write your preference against even one candidate, then your vote is considered invalid, which means you have to be quite intelligent to be able to vote on the Australian ballot paper. So in Australia, I keep hearing people say, give me number one, give that person number two. That way you'll be sure that I will win. Whereas in India, very often voting is, call for votes is done in simply the name of the symbol, because they're not even sure the voter can read. So they will say, vote for, I don't know, vote for hand or cycle or car. They used to say vote for glass, but I believe that party lost the glass as a symbol. So the quality of democracies is quite different. So I'd like for you guys who are voters in Australia to explain what goes into helping people make a choice.
It's a great point. I think it's very complicated when you compare it to other countries. We also need to fill out within our electorate who we want, but in a preference basis from 1 to 6 or 7, depending on how many people are running in that particular electorate. So we do need to be more informed, and that's why tools like this are incredibly helpful for the average voter. Voters who want to be informed, of course. There are a number of voters who choose not to be informed, or they're complacent. But it is compulsory, and we really do try and make sure that everyone is as informed as possible. So for me, it's always been a question of what's the most pressing matter for the country at that point in time. And in the past, it's always been either the economy or immigration or the housing pricing crisis, depending on where you are. But I think this time around, finally, we've got climate change on the agenda, and it's become a top priority for a lot of voters. So definitely something that I look for is which policy is being put forward by which party that supports a greener climate, a better climate change policy for us. So that's kind of what I use to lead my intuition. But of course, there are a number of factors to take into consideration. It's good to just show our viewers what the actual ballot looks like. So if you can see that image here, so there's two different ballot papers. One is for the House of Representatives, which is the lower house, where the Prime Minister is elected, and you'll have to put down 1 to 8 in the order of choice within your electorate. It's for your representative. And there's also a white ballot paper, which is the Senate vote, which is the upper house. And again, there's a choice between, I suppose they give a choice to people who are a little bit more particular, but most people tend to choose this top choice above the line, and they need to fill in at least 6 boxes. So 1 to 6 in the order of preference. So this is what makes it a bit more complicated than in other countries, perhaps, as you were saying before.
Aditya said, and you said, that we should look at the election from a humanist perspective. I just want to add one part, that an election is a mechanism of democracy. And democracy is a result of humanism. Democracy is not its mechanism. Democracy is a concept that everyone is able to decide the direction of his or her life after a particular age. And together, members of a society can also decide the direction of a particular society. And each of these people who is deciding has equal weight, which means it's the equality of all humans. Now, no one is excluded. Of course, in Australia, it's compulsory. But in general, the mechanism means that no one is excluded. Adult franchise. Now, in Switzerland, up to 1971, women could not vote. In Kuwait, in Qatar, in the Arab Emirates, very slowly, women are being co opted into the voting mechanism. It's not for everyone. We might celebrate the fact that the first woman went into space, was allowed to be in a spacecraft by the doctors and the technical officers 60 years ago or something. And yet, I think in a country like Saudi Arabia, it's only recently that a woman is allowed to drive a car. Now, it's only in countries where humanism has and humanist values have taken root that equitable opportunities, equal opportunities to all genders has been made possible. That is a gift of the humanist, human rights, universal human values approach. I mean, Roe versus Wade, which is a big discussion now in the US, whether abortion is possible or not, should it be allowed or not, even when a woman has become pregnant after a rape. Now, that is in question in the US. But how many know that it was 1 year after Roe versus Wade judgment, where the Supreme Court said women have rights over their bodies, that the US allowed women to apply for a credit card without a man signing it? We're talking 1970s in the US. Of course, 1960s in the US, it was still not obvious whether black people and white people could be in the same bus, could be in the same school. whether a person sitting in a white people's seat in a bus can be expelled or arrested. All that was the anti humanist, non humanist, mostly religious mindset and racist mindset. It has all moved to where we are talking about democracy, equality, equal dignity, man, woman. Now we are talking of more genders than just male and female. This is an understanding that has been given to the world, to humanity, by the liberal humanist perspective. I just want to say that because whether an election will deliver democracy really or whether it will deliver majoritarianism is also something that has engaged the thinking of many humanist thinkers and political scientists. Just wanted to put that bit in.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that there's a fine line between the two, and we can sometimes get confused and even proud about running a democratic process, but not an actual democracy, which are different, I suppose. Um, but yes, so if we want to hear from Sarath as well, just in terms of any ideas or feedback in what we've discussed so far.
I think what strikes me the most is I think the contrast in the way how election it's just the kind of voting that is done in India compared to what's it's done in Australia as you've been explaining just now,
Yep.
and also the way how people make choices. Um, I mean, because in India we have the highly prevalent mode that a vote or an election is all about having crossing the passing the post, which is like whoever gets highest number of votes is clearly the winner. That's just one way of selecting a candidate among among a bunch of candidates. So I think that's interesting. I think that's a key takeaway. I think what I able to clearly see here, and here again we vote based on the names there here, right? The ballot paper here in Australia.
Correct.
And I think in India there is a good reason to have you know election symbols instead of names, because names would denote caste in India, so that would affect the voting. And at the same time, sometimes I feel that's also being taken advantage of by politicians to make it a very party-centric voting.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who you vote for as long as you vote for that emblem. You're loyal to the party. So I think
Yeah.
it works in both ways. People take advantage of whatever rules they have in this manner.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think from a humanistic standpoint, I think what strikes me most is I think the biggest uh, um, I think India, what we have been doing consistently well is with the elections. And I think there are the way we conduct elections, the way we make sure it's the world's largest democracy. So that you do have this sort of last mile connectivity in terms of that getting the vote, and people uh, encouraged to vote, and people really passionate about voting. We hear stories about old people like 80 years old, 85 years old, from remote areas in India. They are traveling for like 2 days, 3 days just to place a vote. And at the same time, there are many people who are very much cynical about what the value of their vote is. And I think it should be a wake up call to see, people with no formal education traveling miles to cast a vote. So I think there is that sense of inspiration we can get, and we should get rid of such kind of cynicism as well. That's, I think these things are what you know, are striking to me. And I think the way in India, even in India, there are some suggestions from many quarters in civil society and in public domain, and from many experts and intellectuals and social scientists and so on, to change the way how we are voting, to get get rid of first past the post system in across the board, or at least in some areas, to make it more representative, and to make sure, the selection is not clearly biased towards those who spend more in elections, in contrast to have a better representation. So the outcome should better represent, the constituency and the demographics of the voters of that constituency, rather than how much you're going to spend. I think that's one more observation that I can make.
I think we can agree that being apolitical is really against the values of humanism, isn't it? In the sense of being complacent about the value of your vote, or we even have some celebrities coming out proudly saying I never vote, and they make it fashionable. I think it's safe to say these kind of actions are not helpful to the democratic process. Thank you for that, Sarath. I'll just start the survey now so we can just go through the questions. But basically, there's about 30 questions. We start with policy, then we'll go into parties' profiles, and then we finally look at the results against what we think we knew about ourselves versus how we actually stand against the policies provided. So should we get started on this particular issue? Australia Day should continue to be celebrated on January 26th.